just hit the buttons. We're about ready to fire this puppy off. It's Wednesday, September 22nd. It is exactly 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. And we're live with lunch conversations with Randy and Teddy. Got Peter Marsh on here.
Yep.
Got Clay Johnson on here, and we're ready to make this thing happen. So, hey everybody, I'm Teddy Burris. I work for a company called Burris Consulting. We're social media strategists, trainers, and coaches. We're all about helping people master the use of this tool called LinkedIn for business, career, community, nonprofits, B2B, B2C. Absolutely love doing corporate training programs, one-on-one coaching, public webinars. Absolutely have a blast showing people how to use the Swiss Army knife called LinkedIn every day, and I have a good time. So those of you who have never met my good friend Randy Wooden, I'll let him introduce himself now.
That'd be me. That'd be the talking pumpkin today. Between the color and that, it's the first day of fall, folks, and we're glad you joined us today. Randy Wooden with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, based here in Winston-Salem, in the luxurious man cave today, because I can be with you guys. So that's a good thing. Hey, we help professionals in a job hunt. Peter, I do the same work for Goodwill that I did when you and I first met back in 2000, except now I get a salary and benefits. So that's a good thing. But same sort of work. If you or somebody you know that might be in a job hunt, have them reach out. Find me on LinkedIn. If you can't find me on LinkedIn, you're not looking hard enough. I'll tell you that. Hey, we got a great show today, folks.
And you can't spell Randy with an I.
True. Got that one? Yeah, that would be my twin sister.
Yeah.
But so we started our show back when COVID first hit. So we've been at this now for a year and a few months, I think, April of 2020. So it's been a while. But one topic we haven't really touched on, and we're going to touch on it today, and I've had people ask about this. So I contacted Peter Marsh. He's one of our guests today, and he also had us bring in Clay Johnson, our other guest. And that's this. It's what is Innovation Quarter? We've heard about that, downtown Winston. We've heard about things like Flywheel. We've heard about, okay, this ecosystem, entrepreneurial, this and that. We've heard that Greater Winston changed from the Chamber of Commerce. What are they doing to attract businesses? And if I'm a job hunter who's a little frustrated with getting laid off and such, and thinking about, maybe I want to try my own gig. We've got a couple folks here that can talk to that and give you some ideas about how to make that happen and what's going on sort of behind the scenes in the business community here in Winston-Salem. So having said that, let me first introduce briefly Peter Marsh. Peter, again, we've known each other for probably longer than we care to remember. It's been a long time. And you've been involved in a number of projects over the years, and not the least of which is something called Flywheel. So I'd like you to talk that. What is Flywheel? And also, what is Innovation Quarter? And how does that all kind of blend together, Peter?
So thanks for having me on,
Yeah.
Randy, Teddy. It is like a reunion here, and I'm really privileged to be able to talk to your audience today with Clay Johnson, because Clay has jumped in on behalf of the Chamber into the entrepreneurship ecosystem here with both feet and is having a big impact. So Clay, thanks for joining us today. Flywheel designs and operates co-working innovation centers. So let me unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
First, the co-working piece. Co-working is basically kind of like a YMCA for work, if you will. It's a shared work environment for independent producers, outsourced consultants, freelancers, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, a place where they can go work as part of a community of purpose-driven individuals in a shared work environment. It's a movement that's been actually fairly disruptive to the commercial real estate market. It started on the West Coast back in 2007. And what's enabled this is the huge amount of workers in the population today that don't have to necessarily punch a clock or report into a corporate headquarters campus. And obviously the COVID situation has really amplified this demographic with all the work from home that's occurring. But people still need a place where, working from home gets very lonely. Working from home gets very difficult to concentrate if you have kids in particular, if you have dogs, cats, laundry machines, and all kinds of distractions. So co-working spaces provide, if you will, a third place to go work and to feel and actually become part of a community of individuals that are entrepreneurship and business minded, that work together. And by sharing the work environment, they also pay less than they would pay if they were to go out into the commercial market and try to find a small space that's dedicated, because we provide internet. We have amenities like free espresso, free coffee, free beer. We have a plethora of meeting rooms, all kinds of amenities. And basically by sharing that environment, it brings the cost down and provides a much higher quality place to go and really concentrate and get your work done.
That's good. It's good to get to know what co-working space is. And we're going to dive a little deeper into that. By the way, do you offer free like Uber drives home? Because, free beer. Hey, I got to work late tonight, honey. I'll be home
Peter
late.
said that this is for professionals, Randy. So you have to
Oh,
have
okay.
a professional when you drink.
We do survey our members regularly for different services that we might be able to pull in for them, but that one hasn't come up. Right?
Hasn't come up yet in the old suggestion. Let's bring Clay Johnson into this. Clay, if you could, I know you're with Greater Winston-Salem, and they do a lot of stuff in the community. And when I say stuff, that means more, it's sort of like Goodwill. We do so many things at Goodwill that people, they don't know all of what we do. They may know us for our retail stores, and we may think of you as, okay, you help businesses. Well, that's pretty broad. What's your role there, Clay Johnson, with Greater Winston-Salem?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on here, and I appreciate Peter recommending me. That was really nice of him. And so in terms of what we do at Greater Winston-Salem Inc., obviously, I'm sure you all know that we used to be the chamber. We've rebranded. My role, I'm newer to the organization. I started on March 1st. So I definitely started way after the whole rebranding and merger of the chamber and Wisby into Greater Winston. So I'm talking at a little bit of a disadvantage, but ultimately what we do at Greater Winston is, we obviously have the typical chamber stuff, membership. We provide, events and support to our members, but we also have an economic development team, which includes me and then Laura Lee, my boss, and then a couple other people. And what we do in the economic development team is really focus on recruiting and retaining companies. And to kind of dive a little deeper into that, we focus on, large corporations as well as, startups, entrepreneurs. And so we focus on recruiting and retaining larger organizations and recruiting and retaining startups and entrepreneurs on our end. So, and like I said, our goal is to kind of grow economic development within Winston-Salem. And my role, it's a little newer. And Laura and Walter, my coworkers, focus a little bit more on the larger company side. They've been doing a great job over this past year. They've announced 488 new jobs, and then 296 million in capital investment through expansion and new business attraction. And that's in 2021, which is really exciting.
We're going to dive a little deeper into some of the initiatives going on with Greater Winston and such. I always ask all of our guests the why question. So Peter, I don't know if I ask you that, and so I'll give you some time to think about the why question, but I did mention it to Clay before we went on today. So everybody has a why, or that maybe not the aha moment, but it could have been a series of events or things that have occurred at some point in our life that says, you know what, this is what I was meant to do. This helps me stay motivated and get out of bed in the morning, and I'm excited about it. Clay, what's your why for what you do with Greater Winston?
Yeah, so my why is starting your own company and growing it and having a successful exit can really be life-changing in a way. I've seen it, change people's lives. And My background is in startups. I worked for two, helped found one, was employee number two at one startup, and I've seen how life-changing that can be. And my goal is to help push people here in Winston, give them the support that they need to be able to kind of achieve that dream of starting their own company, and if it's their desire to successfully exit in a way. So it's kind of what drives me, is helping people achieve their dreams. It's very lofty.
And life is a journey, and the dream we have today may change over time given the economy and what new things happen. And so, Peter, I'll throw it to you as far as what's your why for what drove you through this, the whole Flywheel initiative, and where you sit today.
Yeah, so my why is a little more circuitous, but when we started Flywheel, I'm also a partner in an architectural firm, Workplace Architecture and Design, and we had been involved in the early stages of planning and developing the projects in the Wake Forest Innovation Quarter. And that economic development mission is something the entire community is behind, obviously, and is really being spearheaded by Wake Forest as the engine that's making all of the activity in that large revitalization of the central business district possible. But going back 20 years and several presidents of the Wake Forest Health Sciences and Innovation Quarter ago, we were involved in some of the master planning, programming of the facilities. We were involved in the project management and some of the design for the biotech place. We designed in Marsh headquarters. So we've been very involved in the real estate and architecture and design side of the Innovation Quarter. And when we started Flywheel, our largest client asked us to locate it in the Innovation Quarter. And of course, we couldn't say no. And that happened to be one of those great serendipitous things that happens in business, because at the outset, that was not a good location for us in terms of the demographics and the population that we were seeking to serve. But what we discovered there was a really compelling business model for markets outside the big markets. So secondary, tertiary size cities and satellite communities of the major markets. It's difficult to run a profitable co-working business, but if you lean into innovation and commit yourself to supporting entrepreneurs and actually invest in startup companies, great things happen. So really, out of desperation of figuring out how to make our business model work, we discovered this really incredibly rewarding business model of co-working innovation space. So now we get to the innovation part, which is supporting the transformation of our economy from the legacy industries to the future, with an emphasis on rapidly scalable, technology-focused companies that can grow quickly and be a major part of our economic development and impact. So we actually started thinking of ourselves less as a real estate kind of operation, although we are at our core, we're a work hotel for purpose-driven individuals. But what we're really about is the creation and investment in rapidly scalable, technology-minded entrepreneur companies. And so we raised an investment fund. We got very focused in not the short-term play, but the long-term play of how you can lean in over really a decade of activity to create a new economy. And Winston-Salem is the envy now of comparable sized cities, because we've developed a multi-layered ecosystem that supports entrepreneurs, whether they're Main Street type entrepreneurs or lifestyle businesses, all the way to scalable companies. We've got a complete set of resources, a multitude of programs, and a variety of investment funds that are supporting the entrepreneurs. And Clay comes into that picture with a new development that's being supported by the Winston-Salem Business Inc., which is the Whisper Fund. So
Sure.
Clay, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
We'll get into that in just a second. Let me jump in here. We've got Peter Marsh and also Clay Johnson joining us. If you have questions for either Peter or Clay, please put those in the chat box, comments or questions. And Teddy,
And pay attention to my questions. I mean, you got 15,000 attendees on here right now. I'm dropping questions in there. I'd love to hear your perspectives. Has anybody used, participated in, been a member of, or visited a co-working space? Love to hear if anybody's done that. Back to you, Randy.
Several years back, Peter gave me a tour of the facility. Was that on Vine Street?
Vine.
Yeah,
Is it
it
Vine?
was 525 at Vine was our original location.
Mhm.
Then we moved to the Center for or what is it, Clay? Help me out here. The Center
CDI,
for
Center for Design Innovation.
Thank you. How quickly I forget. And then we doubled the size of our space when we moved here to 500 West Fifth. So this is actually our third location in Winston-Salem. And as I said, we're now building out a network kind of following the I-85 corridor, eventually from Northern Virginia all the way down to Atlanta.
I'm with you. So again, let's say the term innovation quarter. You've talked a lot about co-working space. So innovation quarter, is that something that Wake Forest Baptist Health started? Who are some? Help us understand innovation. Is that a series of biotech companies? Is it? How do I get to be a part of it? What is innovation quarter? So many people have heard that, but what is it in layman's terms? Either one.
You want to run with that, and then I'll back you up.
Perfect over there. Help us understand. We kick around innovation quarter. Well, okay, it's downtown. It's a bunch of old buildings that somebody renovated that looks pretty cool from the street. But what goes on there, and how do businesses merge with that? How do they get involved with that?
Whoa, something happened, Clay. You're muted.
Clay, you're muted. I'll jump in while
Yeah.
he's unmuting. So the Innovation Quarter is the largest central business district master planned innovation community in the United States. It was started by Wake Forest and by the leadership, really all of the leadership of Winston-Salem, when we realized we needed to migrate from legacy industries like furniture, tobacco, textiles to something new. Clearly, globalization was completely changing the world, and Winston-Salem did not want to be caught without a future. And it was a huge gamble. And we're lucky that Wake Forest, led the way in terms of committing to the development of a 230-acre central business district community that's focused on innovation. They then seeded those developments over time with their own people, with their own health sciences research departments. So it is on the Wake Forest side, it's basically a biotechnology community populated with Wake Forest institution research components. And
now, Peter, is that Wake Forest? Is that the hospital? Is it the university? Is it both? Or
it's led by the hospital. It's led by Wake Forest Baptist Health, but the university is now involved with their School of Engineering and deploying some of the actual Wake Forest University liberal arts departments are now active in the Innovation Quarter. So the idea is you start the development with your own resident resources in terms of knowledge resources. And organically over time, if you have a really strong live, work, play kind of set of design guidelines, other companies, other innovation-oriented companies will begin to co-locate with the knowledge resources in the innovation district. And that has come to pass. When Inmar moved their headquarters there as the largest technology company in Winston-Salem, the innovation district reached its tipping point in terms of population. And now you're seeing younger technology companies co-locating there, and really vibrant set of activity as the park continues to develop. The most of the northern district that's now complete was the redevelopment of historic R.J. Reynolds tobacco plants. And now we're seeing new development moving south into the central and southern districts of the innovation quarter that are going to be, new companies coming in and new real estate development adding to what's already been done. But it is an innovation community, a true innovation community populated with knowledge workers, technologists, data scientists. Wake Forest has the largest data science program among the academic medical centers. So it's really quite an asset for the community.
So let's see, Kurt asked, what companies are in the innovation quarter, and Clay and Peter, I know you may have these names off the top of your head because you know all these names, as my camera just went totally unfocused. But here's some of the names: Foresight Tech, Caronetics, Wells Fargo, Daytech, Cushman and Wakefield, Cranky's Coffee, Goler Community Development, One Logic, One Street Capital, Cycle Your World, Optical Concepts. These are just some of the companies. Oh, by the way, Incendiary Brewing Company. Where's my pizza joint?
Can't forget about Incendiary.
What's the name of the pizza place?
Cugina Fornes.
And these are just a small list of the companies that are there. And it's a great mixture, but they all align in so many different ways, and it's a really cool ecosystem. Back to you, Randy.
Yeah, I wonder too if people are curious, can people get a tour of the acreage, or just are there tours offered? Or if I'm a prospective, tenant, would I reach out to Clay, or how would I get an opportunity to kind of look behind the curtain there and see what all goes on?
Yeah. I mean, so you wouldn't necessarily reach out to me, but you can definitely reach out to. They have a couple of employees that are like Cecil, because a lot of admin work, and then just kind of reach out to them to get a tour on the book. But yeah, they'll definitely give tours and explain what they're doing on their end. But if you want to reach out to me, you can. I can try to connect you with the right person.
I mean, if you just go to the Innovation Quarter website, the staff is listed there, and they are more than happy to give you a tour of the.
Hey, Clay, I'm not sure what's going on with your microphone there, so I don't know if you have a crack staff that can look into that or whatever, but just be sure to
might need to
speak
get
up.
a little closer to it, Clay.
Maybe a little closer. It kind of cuts in and out. Now, Peter, well, we'll find out in a second. Peter had mentioned the word whispering. Is that a program or something? So let's throw that to Clay when I so rudely jumped in there to change the topic on you. What was Peter talking about? What is that?
All right. Well, hopefully my microphone issues are resolved. But the Whisper Fund, Whisper stands for Winston-Salem Partners Roundtable Fund. So basically, what it is, it's a pledge fund with a number of members, mostly based in Winston. We have a membership size of over 65. And basically, the goal of the fund is to invest seed stage capital in Winston-based startups that are specifically that are scaling and that have a focus in industries in which Winston has an expertise. Industries like healthcare, tech, data analytics, aviation, VR, things like that. And the key is that they have to be based in Winston, so that it kind of goes back to our whole economic development push to try to grow the startup community, the number of startups that are here, and it's a newer the Whisper Fund is newer. We just had our first pitch night a few days ago. We had a good turnout. We're excited. But yeah, so it's there's two key components. As I mentioned, the companies that Whisper invests in will have to be based in Winston. And those companies will receive capital, obviously, but they'll also receive access to our members, the expertise of our members. And with over 65 members, a lot of them, are really well connected within their industry and to provide, guidance as well as connections, which is huge. So.
I know the what had been the chamber, but Greater Winston is involved in multiple layers here, not just with startups, but also with bringing in businesses that may already exist, but maybe expand to the Winston area, or maybe that are considering relocating just in general and moving their headquarters here. So we'll get into that a little bit too, and try to get a look into the future and also the present. So where do we stand now, and what are some challenges we face? I'm going to throw this to both of you, and we'll start with you, Peter, and that is how COVID has impacted the business model, how you identify tenants, how they find you. Has it helped you? Has it hurt you? And let's take COVID as a whole, because let's face it. I mean, it's been around a year and a half, and it ain't going away any day soon, right? It's going to be a while. So walk me through the COVID thing and how that's impacted how Peter Marsh sleeps at night.
So
I know you sleep well, though. You said you always get good rest.
Fine. I don't have any trouble with that. I do wake up a few times and think about stuff, though. COVID actually impacted us in two different ways. Maybe I should say three ways. So on the first wave, when COVID first hit, and the stay-at-home orders were enforced, obviously our coworkers did not come to Flywheel, right? So, but it's a testament to the community that we built and the strength of the community that we lost very few members during that phase. They continued to maintain their memberships. Even though they weren't utilizing the facility, they saw the value of the community that we had created and built. And the fact that they work with each other, do projects together, things of that nature, helped us get through the first wave of COVID much more successfully than most co-working spaces. Most co-working spaces really hit the wall and had zero activity. That was not the case with us. When things reopened, our space rapidly repopulated, and we actually achieved higher levels of membership. I think within 2 months after reopening, we were at higher levels of membership than we were in 2019. So we did really well in spite of the challenge that the pandemic presented. The second aspect is the pandemic, and this is true of times of uncertainty and disruption and economic downturns, are typically times when entrepreneurship surges. Yeah. And that is because people have, basically take stock, look in the mirror and say, hey, maybe it's time to make a change, or maybe that change has been forced in terms of layoffs and things of that nature. This year saw the largest surge in entrepreneurial activity in the state of North Carolina in its history, by a magnitude of 60% increase. So there were over 145,000 new business entities formed in North Carolina in 2021. And that's a direct impact of the disruption of the pandemic. And because we're in the business of serving entrepreneurs, that creates quite a lot of positive activity and deal flow for us. And then on the backside of the pandemic, I mean, right now, with the Delta variant, we're in as worse shape as we were in the first surge, in the first wave. So what's different is we've learned to live with it. We've learned the value of vaccination. We've learned the value of the 3 W's or whatever they are: the mask, the washing the hands, and the watch out, stay 6 feet away from everybody. That basically what we're observing right now is people are learning how to live with the uncertainty of the health situation. It's serious. It's something that everyone should take incredibly seriously, but people are learning how to live with it. And on the backside of it, it's going to create an even larger population demographic that needs to be served by co-working spaces. People looking for flexible workspace solutions that don't require long-term leases or rental agreements, that are simply month-to-month flexible working plans. So the forecast for co-working is extremely positive coming out of COVID.
Thank you. Yeah, Teddy? Teddy's muted, which you almost never will
I almost
encounter.
never do that. Hey, folks, I'm learning the technology. I'm Teddy Burris. You're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Our special guests today are Clay Johnson from Greater Winston-Salem and my good friend Peter Marsh from Flywheel Co-working. The conversations about the economy, about what's going on, about innovation, about co-working. The focus is around Winston-Salem, but what we're talking about applies in all kinds of spaces and all kinds of industries. Randy, back to you, my friend.
Well, thank you. So let's turn to Clay for a moment. Let's talk COVID. How has COVID impacted how you and your team go about your business of trying to attract businesses, encourage startups, and so forth? How has that impacted you?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of attracting startups to Winston, we typically would like to do in-person visits.
Clay, move in closer to the microphone. Let's try. We're going to try something
Can y'all
here.
hear me now? Can y'all hear me?
Much better. Yeah. Now your face is huge, but we'll take it.
But want to hear you.
I want to hear you. Yeah, I want to hear you.
I feel
Get
like
in.
audio for a podcast is probably important, right?
Just a little.
bit.
Yeah.
Well, kind of back to your question in terms of COVID and our efforts in recruiting startups. So, one area that we really, try to focus on when recruiting startups is the in-person visits. So, getting enough startups not based in Winston to agree to in-person visits to the point where we're allowed to go visit, a community. But for the most part, in terms of recruiting startups, the bulk of our efforts are in, digital marketing efforts, direct startup outreach via email or phone calls. So COVID really hasn't disrupted us to a large extent, which is really good.
Hang on a second, Clay. I'm old, so I don't hear that well. So I'm going to throw some. We've never done this before. Clay, I'm going to ask you to jump off this thing and jump back on again. Okay, if you can do that.
Log off and log back on.
Log
Clay,
off, log back on,
and
and we're going to run with Peter to buy some time until you can get that computer back on. But try to jump off here and then jump back on. There you go. Yeah, it's because Clay's got a lot of good intel we want to get, and it's tough when you can't hear it. So hopefully he'll be able to hop back on here. So Peter, yeah, you talked about how COVID has changed a good bit. So I have a question for you. If I have an idea, a concept, an idea, but I may not have a business plan, I may not have thought it through entirely, that kind of thing, but doggone it, I have an idea. So, and I'm sure you hear that all the time. I have the greatest idea. What is your advice? How do you help guide someone to perhaps even consider the co-working, but to get the help or the resources to bring it to fruition? How do you work through that process?
Yeah, so there are just a wide variety of programs that support entrepreneurs. So there are different stages that you go through developing an idea, from an idea to a repeatable revenue model to an actual functioning business that has customers and market traction and an upside potential, and then to actually forming an organization around that and growing into a true growth stage business. So there are different forms of this journey, and there are different forms of scalability of business, right? So if it is a Main Street type business, like a restaurant or a dry cleaner, or maybe it's a retail concept, a brick and mortar retail concept, the Small Business Center program run by Alan Younger in the Innovation Quarter, which is an extension of Forsyth Tech Community College, is the place to go. He's got tons of educational programming, tons of resources to support that type of entrepreneurship. And he also deals with the scalable companies. But the companies that are technology oriented that have the opportunity to grow into, businesses with market opportunities in excess, let's say, of $10 million that can grow into very large, hundreds of millions of dollars in market traction. Those companies tend to gravitate towards our programming, towards, if it's a creative business, the Center for Creative Economy. If it's a business that needs long-term support and incubation, Winston Starts is the perfect place for them to go and grow and get the kind of resources and support. But the very early stage, getting from an idea to repeatable revenue, is that what you don't want to do is spend a ton of time developing all kinds of complex pro forma spreadsheets and a complicated business plan, because you don't even know if you've got a customer set that's going to buy your product or service. So there's a whole methodology called lean startup practices, around which we have built a lot of courseware and course material on. If you go to Flywheel's website, under Flywheel courses, we have a whole series of courses about exactly how you get great ideas that are commercializable and how you get those ideas into a viable, repeatable revenue model for a commercial deployment. So that's where I would send people, that if you think your idea is scalable into a large business, explore lean startup practices and lean startup methodologies, and hit the web. There's tons of tutorial material out there on Udacity and other learning platforms, and go to as many events, entrepreneurship events, as you possibly can. That's one of the most important activities early stage entrepreneur can undertake, is going to events and networking, meeting people, finding out about additional resources, learning about potential advisors and mentors and investors that might support the business. A great example of that is we have a program called New Ventures, which is an accelerator program for scalable companies that also invests in them. And we have an annual event called Demo Day. It's a huge event with lots of startups. I think some of you have attended that. And we've had several companies that just by going to that event got significant investments in their business ideas when they were just at idea stage. So showing up and going to as many events as possible is kind of like the number one piece of advice I give early stage entrepreneurs.
Sounds good. And that's, again, we do business with people that we know, like, and trust. And you may have a great idea, but if nobody knows it, nobody knows about it except you, then, well, good luck. All right, let's move. Clay, let's test the microphone.
Can you all hear me now?
Oh, Lordy, Clay's here.
Hello, everybody. I apologize. Apparently my microphone was not cooperating.
I've got a nice, look at this microphone right here.
I mean, look at that.
It reminds you of Larry King.
Like
I hear for the full hour, but yeah, remember Larry King?
Did I pay for that, Randy?
No, man, I bought this thing about 10 years ago, and we've got a couple at Goodwill I use too. And it makes even an old coot like me sound okay. So I'll take it. But okay, Clay, let's pivot to you and some of the initiatives that are going on with Greater Winston.
Yeah, for sure.
Your role, if I'm understanding, is to attract startups, and that kind of dovetails with Peter, because they may come here, but they've got to have a place to work, and so that may be where they go, is with Peter. But in terms of helping recruit them here versus, I don't know, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Charlotte, or whatever, that's your focus, right? So how do you go about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in terms of how we go about it, we focus on specific markets, kind of what you were getting at. Okay. Each market is a different recruiting campaign. In any given quarter, we'll typically be focusing on 4 different recruiting campaigns at once. And in terms of that, kind of the first step before we start that recruiting process, and before we even start putting together a campaign, we lean on our digital marketing data, as well as our web traffic to be able to identify which markets we go into. So it's a little bit more of a, there's a little bit more of a science to it. So we're not just kind of freewheeling it. So we look at our, Facebook marketing, Google, LinkedIn, as well as our Greater Winston web traffic to see if there's a commonality across all 4 of those areas. And that commonality being if there's a particular market that we're seeing a lot of interest in. And so once we have kind of identified, 4 markets for a given quarter, we'll move forward with some market research to further validate what we're looking into. And so that market research involves pooling startups that are located in that geographic location, a little pulling their contact information, things like that. And then also after kind of we do that market research, then we start the outreach, we start emailing, we start calling, and all the while we're continuing to blast, I don't know if that's the right word, but continuing to inundate these markets with digital advertising, focused on getting the word out that Winston is a great place to move your business, to move your startup, and grow. So.
Interesting. So are you seeing changes from quarter to quarter or from year to year in terms of the types of startups that express some interest and ultimately land here?
So that's a great question. So as I mentioned,
I'm full of great questions, Clay. You should know that by now, right? So, and besides, you prompted me with these things. Well, yeah, most of them anyway, but not all.
It's kind of that point. So I started in this role on March 1st. And so we really haven't rolled out our first recruiting campaign. We're looking to do that in the first quarter of next year. But we have been doing, as I mentioned, we've been doing these ongoing digital marketing efforts focused on getting awareness up in regards to Greater Winston as a great place to start business. And then also kind of going back to the Whisper Fund that we talked about, we're doing, we're going to execute digital marketing campaigns to push out the application for funding so that we can try to attract startups in that way as well.
We have Clay Johnson with Greater Winston-Salem. We also have Peter Marsh, who is, among other things, I guess a founding partner or founding principal with Flywheel. But I'll tell you what, if you want to understand what goes on behind the scenes in Winston, this guy's on top of it. So, and again, what we want to do too, if you have questions for either Clay or Peter or comments, put them in the chat box. Also, folks, if you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Question Mike asks is, venture capital a source of funding for startups only, or is it for existing companies? And I took the liberty of answering it that it's primarily a startup accelerator program. Peter, you want to is it for startups predominantly, or is it beyond that?
Well, I think, the ecosystem has a capital stack for early growth and established businesses. Some of the companies the Whisper Fund invests in, for example, will be businesses that are 2 or 3 years down the road that, are having revenue success, maybe, north of $2, $3, $4, $5 million in revenue, and are on their way to becoming very successful companies. So, it's a great question, though, because there are a variety of capital sources available to entrepreneurs that everyone needs to be aware of. And a very significant development in this community is the Venture Winston Grants program, which just finished screening its first applicants for $50,000 grants for companies that commit to starting their business in Winston-Salem. There's grant funding and investment capital for Main Street type businesses. There's a variety of programs available through the city and county. Our foundation is getting ready to award grants, for economic recovery grants for Main Street type retail companies. So there's a variety of programs for not only scalable startups, but also Main Street startups that are at early stage. And then we've worked really hard to create a series of programs that provide additional capital as companies grow through the different stages of development.
Mhm.
So that if they have capital requirements for growth, they don't just kind of fall off the cliff at any of those later stages. We want to make sure that they have access to capital all the way through.
You know, and Peter, I mean, I've been hanging around Winston for quite a while and trying my best to pay attention to these programs that are out there. And one of the things that I discovered that I think in some respects may be for many more important than just the funding, it's the education. It's hanging out with people who are, you know, banging their elbows, their kneecaps in the same areas that you are, and discovering ideas of how to overcome those, and meeting all the people that, and because Winston is rich in knowledge, and not only in knowledge, but in accessible knowledge.
Yeah.
That is huge.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, the primary educational resources that I can point to, and Clay, you can kind of reinforce this if I leave something significant out. You know, the colleges and universities all have entrepreneurship and innovation programming, whether it's Winston-Salem State, Wake Forest, Salem College. You know, all of our local educational institutions now have some form of E&I programming, and a lot of those programs actually are based here at 500 West Fifth. Then you have the Small Business Center, tons of educational programming for all of the different types of entrepreneurial journeys. Flywheel has its own curriculum and regularly recurring events called Jumpstart and Endeavor, which are educational opportunities and also opportunities for entrepreneurs to meet other people in the ecosystem. Winston Starts has tons of educational programming as part of, you know, if you're accepted into the Winston Starts program, it's not just space, it's the mentoring and the educational programming that they offer. So there's really a plethora of opportunities. It just, you know, you just got to get out there and seek it out and start going to these programs and applying to get into these programs. And you know, it's not only accessible to the community, but it's also there's also quite a lot of diversity and equity in the ecosystem. I mean, entrepreneurs of any gender, racial background, economic background, all have opportunities to get into these activities.
Yep.
You know, a question that Don popped up with is, can you see some ratio of the businesses that are starting out from people who have a great idea and they've been dreaming about making this happen versus, or compared to people who are trying to start a business out of desperation? Can you see that picture, or do you see that much, Peter, Clay?
Yeah, in terms of kind of starting a business out of desperation, I mean, when you're in kind of a situation like COVID or, you know, in 08, you did see a lot of people, you know, having to, especially if job loss is involved, having to reevaluate, you know, what they're doing in their life. And a lot of times during that reevaluation process, people decide, hey, this is the time I really want to start my own thing, do my own thing, and, you know, be my own boss and control my own journey. So I definitely feel like that's the case for sure.
Yeah, hey, I want to pivot here, and we haven't had an opportunity much to talk about the other component within Greater Winston-Salem. We were going to have a third guest on, but schedules didn't work out. Laura Lee was going to join us, and her focus more so is on bringing business to the area as opposed to startups, right? But existing businesses. So, Clay, you're put your Laura Lee hat on right now, and you had mentioned something that Laura would have probably talked about, and it's community goals for the year 2030. So we're kind of looking ahead in that crystal ball. What are some things that Greater Winston is up to, and what are the goals here for this 2030 program?
Yeah, well, that's another great question, obviously. And, you know, I could never fill Laura Lee's shoes. They're big shoes to fill. So
yeah,
Greater Winston, as it relates to our 2030 goals, is set, you know, a number of lofty goals in order to kind of further, direct us in our mission. So one of those goals is to, by the year 2030 is to really be a top mid-sized city in the Southeast, especially for economic growth. And then our second goal is to be a more equitable community. And then lastly, we want to be, continue to be in a great place to raise a family. And so with those kinds of three goals in mind, all of the departments that make up Greater Winston, whether that be economic development, whether that be talent and workforce, all of those departments, we all are, focused on those three goals. And, as it relates to economic development, in terms of that economic growth component, that first component, we're really focusing on a few target industries to really kind of hone in our focus, healthcare and life science, aviation, advanced manufacturing and technology. And then where I come into play, that high growth entrepreneurship.
You mentioned advanced manufacturing. So we've heard the term manufacturing, but when you throw the word advanced, what does that mean? Help us understand that.
So in terms of advanced manufacturing, it's we've done a lot in terms of the manufacturing component. I forget the name of the company, and Laura's probably gonna be mad at me because it's a larger company, but we've recruited a company that does manufactures kind of the can and can ends, which I didn't know that there's going to be a difference between those two components of a can. And this company, they work with LaCroix and a couple of other companies to supply their cans. But we just actually announced a big expansion project with that company. And so that's kind of a kind of an example of what we're focusing on as it relates to advanced manufacturing.
Is that Clay then? Is it more of the degree to which technology is part of the manufacturing process aside, say I manufacture air, right? There may not be a whole lot behind that, but the level of technology and robotics and such that would be involved. That's where the advanced comes in.
And so for that company that we're mentioning, they do focus on their, incorporating more technology into their process. And so that's kind of why we consider them, a part of that advanced manufacturing push for sure.
All right, so let's fast forward to where we are today, 2021. You mentioned this at the top of the show today, so let's go back and rehash that just a little bit. So where do we stand? I mean, COVID has ravaged the economy and we've rebounded. We still can't find workers, and that's maybe a whole other topic for the Greater Winston folks and how we connect people with jobs and companies and so forth. But where do we stand now in terms of job growth for 2021?
Yeah, in terms of kind of what we've been doing, especially 2021, I think I mentioned it earlier, but we've had a few expansion projects and actually a headquarters relocation project come through. And so for up until this point, year to date, it looks like we've been able to announce 488 new jobs for Forsyth County. And with those, 488 new jobs, these expansion and new headquarters relocation will also bring with them, as I mentioned, $296 million in capital investment in the area, which is incredible. And in terms of kind of ongoing projects, we've been working hard, as you can probably imagine. Right now, we have about 50 active projects as it relates to recruiting, business recruitment and expansion. So we're definitely been pretty busy. And
I would ask you to tell us about them, but you'd have to kill us, I think, if you shared that. So
apparently, yeah.
can't go there. Hey, look, we're running short on time here. So, well, we always like to pivot and ask our guests to give us some takeaways. So we'll just ask for maybe one brief or maybe two brief takeaways that you'd like our viewers to have. Peter, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, compared to when we started Flywheel in 2014, the support of entrepreneurial activity in this community is like night and day.
Yeah.
So one of the takeaways is if you are considering an entrepreneurial journey, if you have an idea that you want to test out and see if it has viability as a business, there's tons of support now for whether you're high tech, low tech, or anything in between.
Got it.
And then the second takeaway is there's been just a remarkable transformation in our Chamber of Commerce. We've got new leadership, new vision, new direction, and they're having an impact. I can't speak highly enough of, Mark Owens and the leadership team that he's created for economic development and economic recruitment is just really high performing and very integrated into the community. I mean, they're working with everybody that we've mentioned on this call in a very positive and collaborative way. So I can't give a big enough takeaway shout out to
Very cool.
Business Inc.
Johnson's up for a raise now. I'm just saying. So thanks to Peter Marsh, Johnson's going to get a raise. So Mark, if you're watching, give Johnson a raise because he's working his tail off. Clay, real quick, a quick takeaway.
Yeah, so kind of to reiterate Peter Marsh's comment, I appreciate the shout out and the assistance there. To Peter Marsh's comment, Winston-Salem has an incredibly robust entrepreneurial ecosystem that supports an also robust startup community, which is incredible. And I'm so happy to be able to, help out in any way they need, support them. And one way that we've done that is create a resources finder for entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs. And, it's filterable. You can view each organization that provides that entrepreneurial support. I actually dropped it in the chat. So if you are, an entrepreneur or would-be entrepreneur, definitely check that out. And then, the next thing is continuing to kind of reiterate what Peter said earlier is help bring that startup community together, because when you bring that startup community together, there's a increase in collaboration and an increase in the potential for these startups that are already here to grow and lean on each other and help make Winston a great place to be for sure.
Got it. Hey, thanks both of you guys for showing up. Teddy, get I'll give you a quick story real quick. And that's this. If you have an idea, and I had an idea, as Peter knows, about 20 something years ago to say, I'd like to start my own business doing career coaching kind of a thing. I think sometimes we get held up this paralysis by analysis. And I always told people it may not take off. It may not do great. It may do great. Who knows? But I don't want to wake up at age 60 and look back and wonder what if. So if you have that, I think this might fly, no pun intended, flywheel, but seek out the resources. Peter and Clay have listed a litany of them. So don't let that hide under a shell. Take the shell off, investigate it, because you'll never know unless you give it a try.
Right.
Teddy, throw it to you.
Yeah, good stuff. Clay,
Yeah.
Peter, thank you very much, both of you coming on. Good to see both of you again. I'm going to make an effort in October to come say hi to both of you guys in real life and see the team at Flywheel that I missed so much. So, Look, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. We have lots of great conversations every week. The program keeps growing mostly because of you guys who show up and watch us on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and listen to our podcast. So thank you very much for everybody who shows up. Next week, our conversation is with Lisa Lamb and Mike Fenley. These folks are coming back for the third time from popular demand. We get here from you guys that you want to know.
Cards and letters all the time. You should see the mailbag over here. We get tons
cards and letters, email and text messages, buddy.
Sorry.
Hey,
but anyway, you know what?
Lisa will have a great story about what's going on with NC Works. Mike will have great insight on what's going on at the federal government level and how that impacts our businesses, our careers, the employment industry. It'll be a good conversation. Randy, you got a closing statement?
And I'll tell you, we just heard from Peter with Flywheel, and we heard from Clay with Greater Winston about this whole ecosystem, about startups, new ventures, relocating companies. But you know what? The state and the feds have a heck of a lot to say about things in terms of legislative stuff and what you would call them roadblocks or encouragement. But we'll get straight from the horse's mouth here. We're going to get it from the federal and the state level. What are these entities up to, and things that they're working on that will have a direct impact on the ability for Winston and other businesses and business communities to grow and prosper. So we'll learn more about that next week with Lisa and with Mike. But that's about it. I think, Teddy, we are Out
Boom.
of time.
Top of the hour. See everybody next week.
Have a
Peter,
great week.
Clay, thank you,
Thank
buddy.
you, guys.
Thanks
you.
very much.